Hi, this is Esther Lin, photographer for MMAfighting.com, and here are some of my favorite photos from UFC 207. UFC 207 began way back in November in New York City at Madison Square Garden after the spectacle of a Conor McGregor weigh-in. UFC bantamweight champion Amanda Nunez faced off with former champion Ronda Rousey. I learned later that this was the first time Nunez had ever met Rousey. Just as quickly as Rousey marched on stage, she marched off, and her refusal to comment would set the tone for the rest of the build-up to Rowdy Ronda Rousey's return at the end of the year. Fast forward to Vegas Media Day. Dana White sat and spoke to press in a formal scrum for the first time in years. The UFC president admits he's just here because Rousey won't do media, and to remind everyone that the fights are on a Friday. Without the top stars of UFC 207 here to speak, media clamored to get White on tape. White was full of hyperbole, even claiming that Nate Diaz is bigger than our own Luke Thomas. Downstairs, we crammed into a small room to speak to Cody Gar Brandt and Dominick Cruz while they spun through their satellite tour. And later, we had the fortune of interviewing current bantamweight champ Amanda Nunez in her hotel room, filled to the brim with water, friends, and family. Her sister was broadcasting live on Facebook while we spoke to Nunez, and after, Nunez jumped into the chat to speak to her fans in Brazil. Thursday morning, the room for official weigh-ins was packed. Usually, there's only a handful of us in this room at this hour. But by 8:45, this tiny space had media and fans plastered against the walls. Before the 9 a.m. start time, Rousey walked in, stone-faced, weighed in, and Bob Bennett reads her weight before clearing the scale. The UFC weigh-in producer cries out for Rousey to pose for 5 seconds and for Bennett to move, but Rousey turns and leaves to a song of shouts and shutter clicks. The only other fighter to make weight and still refuse to pose was Brock Lesnar. I was a little dejected, having arrived early to make sure I had a good seat for my first Ronda Rousey photo of the week, only to have these glimpses. Fans behind me sighed audibly. Challenger Cody Gar Brandt, needing a towel, makes weight. Then cornerman Justin Buckles comically looks behind the towel and grins to the gathered media, then back at Gar Brandt. When it's Amanda Nunez's turn to weigh in, a skirmish breaks out in the hallway. She flexes on the scale even as some in the room rush outside to see what all the commotion is about. Dominick Cruz is next and looks ready, emerging from his all-black attire and sunglasses with a snarl and a focused stare. Both title fights have made weight and are set now. Johnny Hendricks steps up to the scale second to last with a heavy sigh. Big Rig covers his eyes, rubs them deeply as if somehow that will change the reading before him, and opens them, staring at Commissioner Bob Bennett with such disdain as he announces 173.5 pounds to the room. Outside the weigh-ins, in the halls, are the Matchmakers. Maybe flying a little under the radar this week, UFC 207 is head matchmaker Joe Silva's last show, or more formally known as the VP of Talent Relations, shaking the hands of fighters after they win. Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard are filling the void that the UFC's longest-running employee is leaving behind, happily shedding all this nonsense for his family and more time to read. We hopped over to the T-Mobile Arena a few hours later for the ceremonial weigh-ins. The lines to get in filled the plaza. After weeks of tension and the little hallway skirmish this morning, the two men in the co-main event go at it again at the ceremonial weigh-ins. Both are smiling as they're separated though, so one wonders if they both walked away feeling like they got the upper hand in that exchange. Then, the moment this giant crowd has been waiting 410 days for, Ronda Rousey takes the stage to stand on the scale. Rousey does her usual pose, hands back, smiles for the fans, and the arena erupts in joyous cheer for the former champion. Rowdy Ronda Rousey is back. When Amanda Nunez emerges, there's a low rumble of boos as the champ ascends to the scale in a lion mask. Nunez looks over at Rousey, who steps forward to meet the lioness in her stare. They meet face to face for only the second time. After the face-off, Rogan wouldn't get a chance to interview Ronda Rousey, who didn't say anything to the fans, who then in turn booed Nunez as she spoke to them. There is a huge crowd of women and girls. These are fans I only see at Rousey fights, and their booing surprises me. They seem so friendly before the stare down. I hope they learn a little about the current champ, Amanda Nunez, before tomorrow night, so they can have reasonable expectations and familiarize themselves with the possible outcomes. Perhaps even enjoy the fights more as an informed fan. On the Fox Sports set, Miesha Tate smiles as she speaks to the woman who took her title at UFC 200. She now faces Nunez as the media. Behind the set, fans wave their signs and flags to support the two women in the main event. We go outside to film the preview show, and a truck pulls by, honking, and we turn to see Dominick Cruz heckling us. Errol Helwani wishes his television colleague good luck, and Cruz shouts back, "Luck is for losers, I'm gonna kick his ass." It's fight night, and it starts real strange. Tim Means very purposely knees Alex Oliveira in the head while Oliveira is down, and while Means didn't intend to foul, that most definitely is an illegal move even with the new rules coming. If your knee is down, you're down. The resulting confusion was apparently quite chaotic over the broadcast, but for me, cage side, I was just watching them pull up a stretcher for Oliveira. The night turned brutal again as Mike Pyle was knocked out cold by Alex Garcia. Pyle's head bounced on the canvas. It was hard to watch, hard to shoot. I have yet to shake that fright from me after all these years photographing fights. It's always scary to see someone hurt. And later in the scramble fest that was Smolka versus Borg, Louis Smolka cried a single tear of blood as Borg tried to finish an arm triangle. And then the crack. TJ Dillashaw's shin made a clear sound as it met with John Lineker's jaw, which I missed, but Lineker catches this kick that lands on his face and takes down a laughing Dillashaw who seems to know just how hard that kick made contact. Dillashaw follows up with a chin-rippling uppercut. The Dwayne Ludwig product laughs. This is fun. Still, Lineker seems impenetrable, even ramming his head into a few Dillashaw elbows. As the second round ends, Dillashaw helps up the battered but somehow still sputtering along Lineker. The third round is much of the same, though. In the end, Hands of Stone has a rock for a head, and Dillashaw walks away knowing that bantamweight belt is back in his sights. Lights dim. Come back up, and here we are, with Dominick Cruz atop the cage steps, taking in the crowd as the adoration swells for the champ. I always love to get a shot of the fighters in the cage in that final stare down as the referee asks them if they'd like to touch gloves one last time. I'm giddy with excitement for this fight. I can feel it in the air. Right off the bat, Gar Brandt is having fun mocking Cruz's fancy footwork with his own shimmies. Where he might have lacked the tools to communicate in verbal sparring matches on the media tour, here, in the cage, Gar Brandt was having a ball, literally dancing around, seemingly having the time of his life. After a cut opened up on Cruz's brow, the champ yelled out, still pumped to be in this match, and continued to come forward even as Gar Brandt's lead pulled away. Between rounds, I looked over at Cruz's brow. It is gruesomely split. Cruz comes back out of the gate firing, landing some good shots, but before long, No Love is toying with the champ again, hands down, flitting out of the way with ease. Indefatigable even when dropped, Cruz hops up each time. The crowd goes wild, everyone is on their feet. The arena is in a frenzy. By the fifth round, it's Gar Brandt's game. No Love even drops back for a quick push-up but pops up quickly as Cruz advances. It's not all amusement though. There are still hard shots to land and hard shots to take. While he lost at the war of words, certainly his rough upbringing contributed both to that disadvantage, but perhaps some advantage here. There are things in the fight game that you cannot teach. And those are the things that captivate us about prize fighting in particular over other sports. There's something about personally besting someone in a way that uses spatial, physical, and violent intelligence as communication. It's an expression of one's response to the variables in our life that we can't control. Into an arena, this specific one to be exact. After 25 minutes, Cody Gar Brandt is the new UFC bantamweight champion. Gar Brandt's victory wasn't for himself, though. And in the post-fight interview, holding back tears, he gives his belt to Maddox Maple, the boy who made a pact to beat leukemia if Gar Brandt would make it to the UFC. Now, less than 2 years after his UFC debut, Gar Brandt is bestowing young Maddox with his greatest accomplishment. The arena dims, and the colored lights flash up. The familiar riff starts up, and Joan Jett's voice booms through the arena. Rowdy Ronda Rousey is making her way back to the octagon. She goes up the stairs and walks through the gate and does a customary hop. The arena darkens once more, this time for the champ. I watch Rousey move in the dark, disco lights whirring about. It's been over 400 days since Rousey last stood here, and many, many years since she was the first to enter the cage, to be the one waiting in the dark. The champ, Amanda Nunez, walks out to Rihanna's anthem to the American Dream, mirroring Nunez's own achievement of becoming champion, gaining the life she had always wanted. The lights come back up briefly as the lioness enters the cage, and as she jogs a lap around, Nunez makes sure to lock eyes with the challenger. The arena goes dark again for the announcements, and I feel that old, familiar nervousness. I feel like I know what's about to happen. Under that blue spotlight, Rousey bounces up and down while Nunez shows her back, just chatting with her corner. The former champ winds her arms, steps back into stance as Bruce Buffer calls her name. They meet in the middle, and I wish so much to see Rousey's face at this moment. Even at the weigh-ins, our time with Rousey was so brief. How could anyone know what was going through her mind? Do we know if she's ready for this? I can't tell much by the big screen, but I look into Nunez's eyes and they are dead set, focused. Back along the cage, as she waits for the referee's signal, Nunez inhales calmly, the hint of a smile on her face, confidence brimming. The round begins, and it's not long before Nunez lands. Instantly, Rousey's expression regresses from one of tentative concentration to fear. Last year's trauma flushes back into her face and freezes the fighter whose dominance once frightened and froze her former foes. Throughout the month leading up to this fight, we in the press questioned her media blackout to focus on winning this fight. Wondered if Rousey was in the right state of mind. Wondered if it was smart to jump right back into the cage with the hungry lioness. And now she stood here, with her dizzy attempts to clinch failing, unable to access any defense as she locked up and fell into a loop in her mind. But there was no time to think, as Rousey was not intelligently defending any of these strikes. I found myself gasping from the violence. No, I think perhaps gasping at Rousey's inability to answer. Rousey stumbles back into the cage where I had no shot, and I shuffled around the post, just as referee Herb Dean sees Rousey's fingers desperately clasp the fence. He stops the fight. Rousey wobbles back, but stays standing. Rousey tips and teeters about, but manages to right herself. She blankly begins to jog forward, as if to rejoin the bout, but it's over. It's as if she kicked that can of pain forward into this fight without ever facing that greatest trauma. And now, here she is again, trying to move forward, as if this was just a knockdown in a boxing match and she could just shake it off and keep going. Rousey stumbles to a stop and watches Nunez strut around the cage, shushing Rousey's wailing coach. The referee stops Rousey so the doctors can check on her. My heart sank when I saw her mouth. It looked like she said, "Why did you stop the fight? I'm okay." It's distressing to see the symbol of women's MMA fall so hard to this now glaringly inevitable result. Nunez comes to speak to Rousey, embraces her for what feels like minutes. Next, Dana White comes to console Rousey, squeezes her hand, his eyes searching her face. The fans were hurt. Their low murmurs were thick in the air as I studied Ronda's face. Shudders all around me fired each time her face was visible between the many commissioners and production staff in the cage. She looks young here. Her blue-gray eyes are wet. What is playing in her mind now? What does Rousey hear at this moment? She avoided facing her devastating loss to Holly Holm by avoiding the prying inquiries from us in the media for over a year, only to have all the pain come flooding back the moment Nunez landed that first jab. I'd been photographing Rousey since her third professional bout, her television debut, and I wondered if she ever reminisced about singing the Time Warp in studio before her dismantling of Sarah Kaufman. I wondered if in that scrum before her Holm fight, when she said that Holm wouldn't like being champion and all the obligations that would come with winning, if she was really speaking about herself. It is, after all, a lot of weight to bear to be women's mixed martial arts. Though Rousey alone isn't women's mixed martial arts. She helped shape it, as Gina Carano and Cyborg have done before her, and her dominance helped propel it into the spotlight. Amanda Nunez is here now, atop the division after a few of her own losses that molded her into the fearsome predator that she is today. When I first met Amanda Nunez, she dispatched her larger, more muscled opponent so quickly, I thought for sure she'd destroy everyone in her path. And while Nunez faced several setbacks each time she lost, she inched forward in the shadows as Rousey skyrocketed to the top of the division and the world. Before Rogan can approach her for comment, Rousey leaves the cage, with her mother's arm around her. I worry that this is the last time I'll see her. Despite her crushing loss here, after only 48 painful seconds, Rousey is still a very good fighter and could still tear the arms off much of the bantamweight division. Ronda Rousey is still an Olympic medalist, a stellar athlete, and a force of nature. And Rousey's loss should teach fans and the UFC that the women are here to stay. That the tumult of the women's bantamweight division in this past year isn't a condemnation of its lack of depth, but rather an affirmation of the talent that's steadily been improving. With so many fighters having used the mission of besting Rousey as motivation. As with the men's divisions, style clashes once reigned, and now most champions must master multiple arts. Amanda Nunez and her coaches saw the once unbeatable Rousey and studied her flawed striking, studied her extensive grappling skill, and studied all of her tendencies, and trained until they could triumph. After her speech, cage crew gathered to help Nunez exit, but instead she danced around them and took a few more laps around the cage. Nunez strutted about, soaking in her monumental win. Most of the fans have gone, but I hope enough stayed to see this woman and her team in their most joyous moment. I packed up and headed to the media tent. In this harshly lit tent behind the T-Mobile Arena, Dominick Cruz, now the former UFC champion, stood as he addressed the press. He saw no point in sitting. Simply repeated that he was here to take his loss like a man, that he loved being champion, but during those hardest days when he battled his endless injuries, he had learned to accept that he could be happy without the belt. And it was in that reassurance, Cruz knew he was strong enough to regroup and fight again. Gun for that crown once more. Cruz even had the humor to take a few more shots, soothing himself with the comfort that at least he's the smarter man. Still threw in a little jab at his television colleague Michael Bisping when he said, "Who would have thought he would ever be champion?" Dominick Cruz, still steadfast in his barbing wit. As for the new champ, Gar Brandt admitted knowing he'd lose that war of words. After all, he didn't even know how to read until the 3rd grade. No Love thanked his team. Then, when asked about Maddox, he paused, again holding back his emotions to recount what it meant to him to be able to share his title with his young inspiration. Outside in the cold desert air, Team Alpha Male posed for a picture with Coach Justin Buckles yelling out, "Maddox in the middle!" Inside the tent, Amanda Nunez answered again many questions regarding Rousey's refusal to do pre-fight media, the UFC's lack of promotion of their champion, and she hoped that the promotion would get behind her now. Out of nowhere, President Dana White grumbled, "We'll promote you." Prior to that moment, I didn't even know he had entered the room, and just as soon as the writers notice him, White promptly disappears. Amanda Nunez is still the UFC bantamweight champion. If you came to this sport a new fan in support of Ronda Rousey, I do hope you'll stay and support these other wonderful women, working hard every day, pushing themselves past their limits to prove their pugilistic worth. Once, Dana White said that women would never fight in the UFC, and now, here they are, thriving, 4 champions into the division with so much more to show. Rousey's achievement was a grand one that elevated the stakes, pushed other fighters to stand taller, work harder. Her fall isn't the end of women in MMA. As this new year begins, I look forward to the competitions ahead and the great battles yet to come. Just you wait and see. This is Esther Lynn for MMAfighting.com. Thank you for watching.